In today's video, I will go over the best units in the game and what game mode you should use them at. Keep in mind, this is my personal opinion, so if you have your own, that's great, just know, this is mine. This video will be different than my other top 5 must-have units. For this video, I will class them in either support or damage. This could add up to 10 or 15 units, and then at the end, I will overall rank the top 5 for each game mode. What I mean by game mode is challenges, story, and infinite. Another quick pointer I want to make. Obviously, you're not going to have every single one of these units if you're a beginner or even a mid-game player. So just know that these are units you could try to target, or you can just sub them out for some other units. First, let's go through some good support units. Support units are great units to get whenever, because chances are you don't have to worry about them going out of meta soon, as support units last much longer in meta than damage units. For an example, let's compare Erwin and Broly. Broly was the first update damage unit, and Erwin was the first update support. Yet Broly is now out of the meta completely, and Erwin is still in every type of meta, whether it's story, challenges, or infinite. Now I'm going to rank some support units, not in any specific order. Erwin's ability to buff 25% and being able to summon horses that are hybrid, meaning hitting ground and flying type units, makes him a very solid support unit. To infinite buff with Erwin, you need 2 Erwins and cycle through the buffs when the other one runs out. Erwin is viable for challenges, infinite, and story, and a must-have overall unit. Shanks used to be one of the best DPS units, but with the new 3.0 update, Shanks is still in the meta for his stun and not his damage. Shanks' stun is unique because it isn't like a Dio time stop and it works off its own cooldown, meaning time stops and stuns work together. All support units have something about them that makes them a support unit, like Katakuri slow or Shanks' stun or Dio time stop. And all of these, let's call them utilities, all of these utilities have a cooldown where the same unit isn't affected by the same util until it runs out. This is why you can't chain Dio time stops, because when you time stop an enemy, they can't be time stopped again for a good bit. This is the same with Shanks stun and almost all of the other support units. Once you start pairing a bunch of the support utility, you can stall for a long time. And because of Shanks' unique ability of a concuss/stun, which no other unit in the game has, makes him a great support unit. Shanks is viable for mainly only infinite, unless you're in earlier stages of story, because his full AoE is nice. And when I talk about earlier stages of story, honestly, any area but hollow is what I mean. Dio has the ability to freeze enemies using his time stop. Dio has a non-ability support by just having his regular attacks time stop enemies. Once you reach a certain upgrade on Dio, you will get the time stop. Dio's time stop used to make him one of the best support units, but now he has fallen out of certain metas, only making him viable for challenges in story. Katakuri has the ability to slow enemies using regular attacks. Katakuri's ability to slow is at all upgrades, and to be honest, line AoE, which is the base Katakuri, is probably the best out of all the other AoE types Katakuri gets. When you use Katakuri, make sure you place them in pairs of 2, one on last, one on first. Katakuri is viable in infinite runs and sometimes story/challenges if you want that slow to help you out. All Might has the ability to knock back at a certain upgrade. There are only 2 units you can knock back in the game, All Might and Whitebeard, unless you count Einstein. The ability to do knockback is a must-have in long infinite runs, so have either All Might or Whitebeard is a must-have unit. All Might is automatic knockback with circle AoE, making All Might really only viable in infinite runs because it's quite pricey to get his knockback in story or challenges. Whitebeard is the second unit in the game that has knockback. He also gets the ability to do knockback at a certain upgrade, but his knockback is manual in the form of an ability that knocks everything in his full AoE range back. Keep in mind, the cooldown on the ability is quite long. Whitebeard, just like All Might, is only viable in long infinite runs, and you can decide if you want Whitebeard or All Might. Kiisuke is probably the best support unit on this list due to the ability of a buff that increases SPA and range, 20% on range and 10% on SPA. To infinite buff, you will need to place down all 3 of your Kiisukes and time their abilities. This crazy ability, and combined with great DPS as well, makes Kiisuke one of the best, if not the best support unit. Keep in mind, Kiisuke is a limited mythic going away most likely in the 4.0 update, so make sure you get them while you can, and Kiisuke is viable in all modes, challenges, story, and infinite. Just know that the ability is quite pricey. Blackbeard is only useful for one thing, and that's his curse. Blackbeard's curse makes it so enemies take 1 to 1.5 times more damage, and he is full AoE. You can simply spread him out and you will be able to cover a ton of area. Blackbeard is only worth a slot taken for leaderboard runs in infinite. Sakura has the ability to passively buff all units in her range for 10%. Keep in mind, Sakura's range is tiny, but the buff is infinite, no need for abilities. Of course, the Sakura buff does stack with Erwin, meaning in total, with all buffs, you can get 35% damage, 20% range, and 10% SBA. Sakura is really only a viable unit in Infinite unless you have the slot to take her in story/challenges. A quick pointer I want to mention real quick: if you're a beginner and you're wondering what mythic should I go for first, make sure you have Erwin and Dio first. If you have them and you feel like you're ready for a mythic, go for Stark or Kisuke. Kisuke because Kisuke is limited, and Stark because Stark is a very good damage unit for story mode. Juzo. Juzo is another support unit that is really only viable in the most specific scenario, and that is Ghoul or Snow leaderboard runs. Otherwise, stay away from this unit and prioritize others. Juzo has the ability to apply bleed, which makes the regen 75% slower. Aizen. Finally, for the support class, we have Aizen. Aizen creates a clone of himself in front of your base that, when touched by enemies, knocks them back a little bit and gives you about 20 seconds of stalling before you die. Aizen is really situational because chances are those 20 seconds won't do too much, but if you want that extra time, feel free to get him. The only type of plan I would use him in is possibly a leaderboard run in Infinite, but even then, maybe not worth the extra slot. Next, let's go through some really good damage units. Damage units are not the best to get near the end of an update, mainly because damage units are really easy to replace in the current meta, especially with power creep. Stark. Stark has one of the highest DPSs, and the highest DPS if you count his Spirit Wolves. Stark does about 32,000 damage every 12.5 seconds, and the ability to place 3. This means you have 2,560 DPS, and the total DPS is 7,680. This would be without his walls. Like we mentioned earlier, Stark also has line AoE, which is great for him, especially on the new map where his line AoE hits absolutely everything on the starter bridge. Overall, I would say Stark is viable for anything: challenges, story, and Infinite. Uryu is a heal unit that is a 100% must-have for the new Hollow Infinite map. Uryu has a 5.6k every 3.4 seconds, and you can place 5. This means Uryu's DPS is 1647, and the total DPS is 8,235. This is without a 25% chance of a crit. Hitting a crit gives a 50% damage boost, meaning instead of 5.k, it would be 8.4k. Uryu has a small circle AoE typing, and I would say Uryu is viable for boss killing or a 100% must-have for any fly-in units map, which is currently only Hollow World. Akainu. Akainu is another heal unit that is once again a 100% must-have for the new Hollow map. Akainu has 16,000 damage and 14.1 SBA, meaning 1.1 thousand DPS and 4.5 thousand total DPS. Of course, Akina does have big circle AoE, and Akina's only downside is the line SBA. Akina is once again really only viable in the Hollow World map. Try to stay away from hill units on maps that you don't need them. Akiora. Akiora has 20,000 damage every 6.3 seconds, meaning the DPS is 3,100, and the total DPS is 12,700. Akiora has pretty bad circle AoE size for a ground unit. Akiora is really only viable for Infinite, as if you wanted a DPS unit for story, you would be using Stark. Finally, we have Arima. Arima has big cone AoE and has 15,000 damage overall with 5.8 SBA, meaning 2.6 thousand DPS and 10,344 total DPS. Arima is a tiny bit better than Akiora, even though Akiora has better DPS. Arima has a way better AoE type, that being a big cone. Arima is viable in late game story if you need it, and 100% for Infinite. Overall, this is how I'd rank the top 5 for each playstyle. For story, I would put Erwin, Dio, Stark, Speedwagon, and Arima or Shanks. If Hollow, bring Uryu in that slot. Challenges: Erwin, Dio, Speedwagon, Stark again, and then for the last slot, I would put Katakuri instead of another damage unit. If not needed, make sure you do bring Arima or Shanks. Of course, if you want the support instead, bring Katakuri. And if it's Hollow, bring Uryu. Infinite. Keep in mind, Infinite is super map dependent, but overall, I would probably say this is the best. But of course, if it is the Hollow World, make sure you bring Akainu and Uryu, both of them if you're doing Infinite. Stark, Arima, Bulma, Erwin, Kisuke, All Might or Whitebeard, or Shanks. If you found today's video enjoyable and helpful, consider leaving a like and subscribing. Keep in mind, this list was made for solo players. Of course, Katakuri isn't the best support unit, but Katakuri is very inexpensive, so you would use them in story and challenges. The other units I listed here are viable to bring to the team, but as a solo, I believe this to be the most optimal team. If you're running 4 people, you can bring all the units you need. I'll see you guys the day after tomorrow. Peace.